But it's just that thing, that thing that bugs me, and the thing with the book is that embroidery, somebody can put a light bulb on a piece of string and it's art, and yet for some people, they don't understand that embroidery is art, and that really gets my...
Is there another question? So I've got one. Can I throw it open? Has anyone got something to ask? Yeah, I've got
What did you do before you did this?
Oh, even what I'm doing now, I suppose, because this is the fascinating thing about me and Mr. X-Stitch is it doesn't earn you much money. So I do IT project management for a National Children's Charity, and I've worked for a charity for about the past 9 years and generally been a bit and stuff like that. And this has always been a sideline, but there's an irony where you enjoy embroidery and you start a website about embroidery which takes up so much time that you don't have any time to do embroidery. That's a top tip there, ladies and gentlemen. Do that,
Can I ask another question? I think I was trying to get to initially. Do you think there's, because you actually said you're working on it, do you think there's two things are married? That you understood that's binary complex?
I don't know, I think there's something about the kind of video game pixelation sort of thing and breaking it down, and I always, I don't know necessarily specifically if it's an IT thing. I think that there's a lot of geekiness that comes out in embroidery and those sorts of things with your video game cross-stitch, and there's heaps of, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, cross-stitch samplers and this and that and the other. I think it's innate in all of us, and I think one of the problems is for various reasons, socio-political reasons, market forces, the content isn't out there that makes you think, oh, I'd love to go and cross-stitch that. But you see it online and you see amateur embroidery people doing it. So when Charlie Sheen had his meltdown, the other year or whatever, pretty soon after that people were stitching his catchphrases in response to it and those sorts of things. I think there's a lot of creativity out there, there just isn't necessarily the content. So I think it's within all of us, but we don't always realise it is because there's nothing to get us there in the first place. So that's kind of half of what I'm about, to be honest. Just get you there, get over the barriers.
Can I just ask, because I was talking earlier, how's new technology working with your current practice, and where's your practice going to be taken?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. But the thing that interests me, first of all, is I use this piece of software called PC Stitch, other computer programs are available, for making cross-stitch patterns, and that just means you can take a picture and process it, and it aligns the colours to thread companies, and you can fiddle around with it and tweak with it, and so it means that you can make anything pretty much out of cross-stitch now, and that's a bit of a game changer. And similarly with the kind of digital printing that you can get, where you can print textiles with images, and Stuart uses a lot of that in his work, I think that's a bit of a game changer as well, because it means that you can fundamentally, you can digital print, on AIDA as well, you can digital print a landscape and then you could stitch superheroes fighting across the top of it, or whatever. Nobody's really thinking, the technologies are quite new, and I don't think people are really responding to that quite yet. And it's similar with, I just got loaned a big digital embroidery machine thingamabob, which means that now I can do digitised patterns and then machine stitch them and those sorts of things. And that's a different genre as well, because it's about taking a picture, running it through Photoshop, and then getting the machine to stitch it, and it's a different quality of stitching. So technology's changing, and what's interesting is to see the sparks where people are starting to kind of take it and run with it.
At this point, it's not just the cross anymore, isn't it? At this point, you make different kind of choices. At this point, you start kind of like actually having a different agenda, don't you?
I suppose, yeah, it's evolved for me, because I know that I remember, it was when I read The Subversive Stitch by Rosika Parker, and I realised that I'd casually wandered into this debate that's been going on for 1500 years about being a man embroiderer, whether embroidery is art, what it means in terms of the production process in a consumer society, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of an agenda that kind of comes from that, and I think it's interesting to see, people making things is becoming more relevant again now, but we kind of lost sight of that. Right? Is that kind of what you mean?
No, well, yes and no. And no meaning, okay, once is, let's say, the technique or the application or the craft is yours.
Right.
You start playing a different game, and you're using what you know inside out in a different way. You start to tip it upside down, and you have probably also different messages. You change from the craftsperson to the artist. That's what I'm after, and I think in doing that, we don't talk very often about that shift over,
Yeah.
where you know the person doing something actually maybe not always consciously, but tries to get different subject areas contacts across, is handling this thing in an entirely different way than when you started doing it.
Yeah, I think it's quite exciting. You know, I've seen a lot of people who do their own pieces of work, and actually, the minute you start expressing yourself through embroidery or whatever medium, I think that's when you become an artist in some form. So we've gone from people just following patterns to expressing themselves more, and I think that becomes a sophistication. So I've done lots of pieces about me as an embroiderer and alpha male and this and that and the other, and work kind of through that, and then you start going even further from that. Because you're not about what am I actually, or how am I stitching, you're more about what am I stitching. And there is that kind of evolution, and certainly then you think, you know that stuff. I'm an appalling stitcher, Kirsty Allsop, Yorkshire Countrymen's Association, so I'll say any more than that really. But I'd like to study Japanese embroidery because I'd like to hone my skills and become better technically, so that then people might be interested in the work I'm doing, but they won't be able to criticise the technique.
Final question from the... Oh, I'll come back to you. Lady in the back.
Hi, I'm DK Butler. I think what's really interesting about all the people that have spoken so far is that sort of narrative that you have in using stitching or embroidery or whatever you want to call it as an art medium, isn't it really? But it's also very interesting the historicness of it and how mankind has always told stories and had that narrative passing on the traditions. And I think it's quite interesting that we lost a lot of that, didn't we, somewhere along the line. I remember as a child, everybody knitted who was female. Well, and my dad knitted and sewed. And that's how we kind of, we all did that when we were younger. And then along came the fleece, and nobody wanted knitted jumpers anymore when the fleece came in. And similarly with computers, etc., everything's very instant now. And yet there are people like yourself who are bringing all those things back in. And I know as a teacher, when I'm working with children, they have lost that concentration now. They can't concentrate, everything's in bite sizes, they can't take much in. And yet, all three of you, I think, have said that idea of stopping time and stitching slowly.
I think what people are talking about now is it's skipping a generation. And so it's kind of like it didn't go from mom to daughter to son to whatever. It's kind of skipped a generation. And we may be talking about a generation who kind of rediscover, if you like, slowness through computers. I think last comment or question from Deirdre?
I'm sort of sitting here assuming who your audience was, and therefore actually who is your audience or your customer. And because you're a man who sews, is there a different, is there a different customer that's come to it because of who you are?
In a way, I hope so. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, I'm a man and I like stitching, and I'm a stitcher. It's irrelevant of gender, but I'm also where I'm a massive novelty. But if I can use that novelty to, like I say, push away some of these existing barriers, so that men want to take it up, to kind of echo the point you're making. We've lost a couple of generations of men overtly embroidering. If my novelty can be used to help get past that, then so be it. I think that there are reasons why people think the way they do about embroidery now, and it's just about time we kick those back a bit. And there's a change there definitely happening, and it's quite exciting, I think. And, if I can do my bit to help push that along, then it's my honour to do so.
And I think you have done. Thank you very much. And going in a